And I am a senior research analyst at Littlesys, and I help run our training program, which today is part of. So thanks everyone so much for joining us. We're gonna be going here for about an hour. It's like a little lunchtime session. I'm joined by my colleague, wonderful Excel expert, Excel whisperer, Lauren Parker. And then our other colleague, Jen, is here just to help out with some tech stuff. I'll let Lauren introduce themselves when they get their part going. But I'm just going to do a quick intro and kind of share some information about Little Sis, and then we'll really spend most of our time jumping right into today's training. So, Lauren, I think you can go to the next slide. Cool. So I think that we'll hear from you all in a poll in a second to hear how many of you have been on a Little Sis training before. But for people who don't know, we are Little Sis. We are a watchdog research organization that specializes in power research and mapping powerful people and organizations in partnership with social movement groups. We do that kind of research on powerful people, billionaires, corporations, elected officials, etc. And then we also train people on how to do that research. We train organizations, journalists, activists, organizers, the general public on the ins and outs of power research to help build up research capacity in our movements. Today's training is part of that work. We also have some tech tools that we build and oversee, one of which is littlesys.org. We sometimes call it the opposite of Big Brother, like little sisters, opposite of Big Brother. And it is a database that's free, it's open source, and it tracks relationships between powerful people, organizations, politicians. Um, so definitely be sure to check that out. Related to that, we also have a mapping tool called Allographer that allows you to make really nice visual maps of the connections between all these powerful people and organizations as well. And if you go to littlesys.org/database, you can learn more about that. This year, we're doing a year-long public online training series that today's a part of. It's completely free, and it's designed to help you all kind of develop power research skills and kind of like a toolkit you can have for various work that you're doing. We've got a calendar up here that is the different trainings we have coming up this year. So you'll see today is March 11th. We're on Excel for Organizers Part 2 right now. Our next training is going to be at the end of the month. It's focusing on researching ICE contracts. And then after that, researching elected officials. So you can go to littlesys.org/trainings to learn more about those, sign up, register. They're all really great. And just so people know, today we're recording today. The recording will be shared. It will be on our YouTube page later this week, and we'll also share the slides. So don't worry too much about kind of catching everything or writing everything down. We'll make sure you guys get all of that. And then here's just kind of the second part of our training series this year. We do a series at the end of the year, the fall into the winter, called Research Tools for Organizers. That's meant to be participated in as like a whole series. That's really like fundamental intro power research tools. So make sure to go to littlesys.org/trainings if you're interested in that. So a little bit about today. We last time did Excel for Organizers Part 1, where we talked about very basic functions like formatting, data types, filtering, sorting, and basic operations. I'm guessing that some of you are probably on that. If you weren't and you want to go back and check it out, you can go to our YouTube page again. Um, it's Public Accountability Initiative, and it should be there. Today, we're going to be focusing on formulas, pivot tables, VLOOKUPs as well. Next. So we don't have the chat and the Q&A open today because there's more than 100 people on. We thought we got a little bit chaotic, but we do want to know a little bit about who's on. So that we can kind of, feel that there's other people here and know what people are coming from. So I'm gonna ask Jen is gonna launch a poll, and if people could just take, maybe Jen will take like 2 or 3 minutes to let people respond. Um, it's really helpful to give us a sense of who is on today. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for filling these out. Cool. It looks like most people have responded and great. So about 65% of you all have been to Little Sis trainings in the past. 35% of you are new. Welcome. And it looks like we have a pretty even split across lots of different movements. So a lot of housing justice and tenant organizing folks, climate justice, migrant justice, Palestine solidarity and anti-war, and some labor folks as well. So thanks so much for joining us today. And it looks like we're averaging that people feel somewhat familiar with Excel. So I think this is the right training for people today, and it will hopefully um, build on some of what you already know. Let's go to the next slide, Lauren. So today I'm just going to talk real quick about just some kind of like use cases in organizing, and then really the bulk will be Lauren walking us through a demo around pivot tables, find and replace, and formulas. Um, Real quick, as part of that demo, Lauren has set up some examples in a spreadsheet. And last time, some people were interested in, when we did that, having a copy of the spreadsheet so that you could follow along on your own. So if you're interested in doing that, I'm going to have Jen share a Dropbox link to the practice data set in the chat. When she shares that, what you'll have to do is click on that, download it. You're going to get an error message, but it's not real. Just keep going through. You don't have to sign up for a Dropbox account or anything. Download the data set. It will be in an Excel format. We're going to be using Google Docs today. So once you download it, you'll then want to upload it to Google Sheets in your Google Drive. And then you can kind of have that set of data that Lauren will be working on to follow along with. Great. We'll go to the next slide. People can do that kind of while I'm still talking a little bit. So just real quick, we talked about this last time too. Common ways that organizers use Excel that you can kind of have in mind. I'm sure you kind of already have in mind. Um, One way is kind of internal data that you want to organize. So that's things like outreach lists, lists of volunteers, organizing conversations that you've had, donor data, lots of lists of people and stats that you need to be able to organize. And then the other way is really data analysis. Which is a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. So examples of that would be if you have a big set of campaign finance data, you're looking at different candidates for mayor in your city and you want to see who their biggest donors are, or you have a big set of properties that you want to organize, or you have a big data set of tax breaks that have gone to a local billionaire corporation and you want to do some data analysis of them, or kind of corporate financials over time. You're looking at a corporation and you want to see how their revenue has grown or declined over time. Those are all examples of some of the things that the tools we're going to talk about today can help you do. And we'll go to the next slide. Great. And I think I'm going to hand it over to Lauren, who's going to walk us through most of the rest of the time.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Lauren, one of the other senior researchers at twittlesis. All right, so maybe you joined us in our part 1 training, so at least this framing will be a little bit of a recap, but we hope with these 2 trainings that we're doing on Excel that maybe that you start to feel more comfortable with this. We really know that working in Excel and with spreadsheets can be pretty daunting. So hopefully this gets you feeling a little bit more comfortable. And then you can, take some of these skills into your organizing work. We will, just a caveat, we'll have some Sopranos references in this training. So apologies in advance to some of the diehard Sopranos fans if I get anything a little wrong or there's some inconsistencies or liberties. Apologies in advance. Okay, so we talked about this last time, but we can use spreadsheets in a lot of different ways. We can create basic tables, do some basic operations like we did in part 1, addition, subtraction, etc. We can do filtering and sorting of our data like we did in part 1. Today, we're going to be talking about slightly more advanced concepts. So cleaning and standardizing data, joining multiple data sets together. We'll be talking through that. And of course, spreadsheets we can use to produce charts and maps and even do some modeling and building of apps. We're not going to do that today, but we are going to be talking about how to aggregate data, clean and standardize it, and join some data sets together. A disclaimer about today, we said this last time as well, but so we are going to be somewhat begrudgingly using Google Sheets, especially with like a large training like this. Google Sheets is a little bit more reliable for demo purposes, but by all means, there are some alternatives out there that are a little bit more secure than Google Sheets, especially if you're using it for your organizing work. There's CryptPad, Proton Sheets, LibreOffice, probably other platforms as well. So just a disclaimer there, but a lot of what you'll learn today, you can transfer it to these other Excel-like or spreadsheet-like programs. Okay, so let's get into the demo. Let's talk through a hypothetical situation that maybe some of you are encountering now or might encounter in your work. You live in a city, several candidates are running for mayor in your city, and you're part of a community group that wants to know more about each one of these candidates and if they receive money from different industries. So are they getting donations from people in finance or real estate, for example? And so the first place to start would be looking at a list of donations to each candidate. So we're going to look at a list of donations to one candidate. And we're going to ask some questions, some research questions here. We're going to try to figure out how to look at that list of donations and figure out the total amount of donations to one candidate, maybe the minimum and maximum donation and the average. We're going to be using some formulas for that. We're going to try to figure out for each industry, what are the total donations? And then we're going to go through just a scenario which imagines that we get new donation data and we have to clean it up a little bit. And we want to be able to add that to our original spreadsheet. So we'll use find and replace. We'll use a function called concatenate. And then we will use a more advanced function called VLOOKUP to join a couple data sets together. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing these slides and jump into the spreadsheet. Okay, and if you're following along, I will try my best to go slowly and just let you know where I'm at so that you can follow with me. Also, feel free to just listen along and go back to this recording later. You'll have that available. So we're starting on the first tab that says donors. We can imagine that this is maybe a data set that we get from our municipality that shows the donors to a certain candidate who's running for mayor. So Tony Soprano, he's running for mayor, and he's had all these donors to his campaign. In column A, here we have the donor name. We have their listed legitimate occupation. We have a field here in column C that says who they're contributing to. So Tony Soprano. We have this column here that shows how much they donated to his campaign, the date that they donated, and then let's imagine that we've taken this spreadsheet and we've kind of gone through and manually coded each one to say what industry the donor belongs to. So Christopher Moltisanti, he's a manager at Webistics. It's a finance corporation, so we've said he's part of the finance industry and so on. So we've done a little bit of work in this spreadsheet so far. So right off the top here, let's try to pull together a couple statistics on this data set. Let's figure out the total donations to this one candidate. And so we can go into this cell here and start with a very basic formula. Whenever you're starting a formula, it'll have a consistent form or what we call like syntax. So all formulas will have a couple similar components. They'll start with an equal sign, and that's just letting the spreadsheet, Excel program know that you're starting a formula. So you start with an equal sign. You will start writing your formula name. So in this case, it's sum. And you can see Google Sheets by default kind of helps you along this process a little bit. You're going to have an open parentheses. And then you're going to include some arguments that describe what data you want to perform the function on. So right now we want to total the donations. So we're going to say that we want to do the sum function from D2 through D17. And you can see that yellow highlight shows the range of data that you're including in this function. So D2 colon, which means through D17. And then we close parentheses to finish the formula and hit enter. Okay, so it performs the calculation. We can see the total donations is a little over $11,000. Now, could you do this sum function as individual cells? So we could do this. We could say sum, open parentheses, D2, comma, D3, comma, D4, and so on, all the way through the end of D17 and get the same value, but it would just take more time. So it's a little bit easier to just use that colon to specify that full range, D17, like that. Cool. So that's how to do a sum operation. What about if we want to know the minimum donation? We could just look in this table and pick it out manually. But if we had a data set with 1,000 records or 100,000 records, that might be a little bit more challenging. So we can use a formula. So I'm going to scroll down. Not going to see the top of this range, but it'll be the same as last time. We can say equals. So we're starting a formula. We can say min, M-I-N, open parentheses, same range, D2, D17, close parentheses, and then hit enter. Okay, so 250 is the minimum donation. The maximum donation is going to follow a similar form, equal sign, max, open parentheses, D2, D17, close, and then enter. 2,000 is the maximum donation. And then the average, also very similar. Equal sign, we're going to write out the full word average here. Open parentheses, D2, colon, D17, close parentheses, equal. So the average donation to Tony Soprano's campaign was $698.75. Cool. So those are some basic functions that I use, almost every day when I'm dealing with data and spreadsheets. Let's move to maybe a more advanced sort of question here. We have some industries, and we have this question of we might want to know donors from which industry are giving the most money. So what we want to do is total the donations over the industry sector. So we want to kind of like create a tally over a category. Whenever you're doing that type of operation, like you have groups and you want to tally data over those groups, you can use what we call a pivot table. And so the way that you would do that, very first way is to highlight your table and only your table, not the extra statistics that you did below it. Go to insert, and then click pivot table. It will generate something like this, and I'll walk through it again, just so you can see what the end table looks like. It'll generate something that looks like this. So you'll have your industry, you'll have your total donations. So let's try that together again. Highlight your table range, go to insert, pivot table, make sure in this little pop-up dialog box that your range is correct. So A1 to A17, insert into a new sheet. That sounds great. Let's insert. And so by default, it's not going to give you the table exactly the way you want it. You have to do a little extra work. So we want to have our rows reflect the industry sector. So we can use this editor pane on the right to drag and drop industry sector into rows. Okay, so we're starting to get there. We have industry sector as rows here on the left. And then we want to create totals of the donation amount. So we're going to take donation amount and put it under values. Take donation amount and put it under values. And you can see by default, it does a sum operation on that. So for our purposes here, that's perfect. We want to know the total donations by industry sector. And by default, it's going to arrange the data in alphabetical order here by industry, by this first column. But what if we want to figure out like what is the top industry that's donating to Tony Soprano's campaign? We can sort the data by actually using this pivot table editor and go sort by sum of donation amount. Okay, and then we want to say descending order so that the higher values are at the top. So now we can see that finance, real estate, entertainment, those are the industries that are kind of the top here. So this is where, donors of the finance, real estate, and entertainment industries are really giving the most money to Tony Soprano's campaign. And just to recap how I did that, I went to this industry sector indicator here on the editor pane. I sorted by sum of donation amount, and then I selected the order as descending. Cool. Now we can add a little bit of detail to this table, make it a little bit more complicated. Like let's say we want to just show, okay, so who are the donors under each one of these industry sectors? We can take donor name and drop it under industry sector. And at first it looks really overwhelming. And let's just turn off these totals to simplify it. So here, this might be helpful. we can see that, so finance, this is the industry where the most donations came in, but it's really just one donor, Christopher Moltisanti. But under entertainment, we have 3 donors. Under retail, we have 2 donors, etc. And if you want to actually just go back to the original table that you had, you can just click this X and get rid of that. I'll show one more thing with pivot tables that I often use, and that's the filter option here at the bottom of the editor pane. If you want, right now, this pivot table view is including everything in our pivot, in our donor table. But let's just say we want to not show donors who are part of the medical industry. So let's take that out. We could take industry, drop it under filter, go down there, go to that drop down and deselect medicine. Hit OK. And you can see it just removed it from the pivot table. It's not removing it from your underlying data in the donor data tab. It's just removing it from this view. And by default, it's going to update the grand total to exclude that. So whenever you're looking at pivot tables, make sure you're checking if any filters are applied. So if we want to add that back in, we could add medicine under the filter, or even just delete this filter altogether. Cool. All right, so now we've answered some questions on, what are the total donations? What's a minimum and maximum and average donation? We've created this table, this pivot table of donations by industry to this particular candidate. What if we've done all this work, time has passed, and now we get a new table of new donations? How do we start to kind of integrate that into our original work? So if you go to this new donations tab, this is imagining that we've got a new data on some new donations to this candidate. So right off the bat, you might see that the data doesn't look great. There's some issues with this. We have a little bit of cleaning to do. So first, we have this first column here that says first name. There's this word donor that's attached to each one of these first names. So that's different than how we had in our original spreadsheet. And it looks like the first name and last name aren't in one column together, so they're separated out. That feels a little bit different. So let's actually clean this up a little bit. One thing that you can do, and this is a very common thing that I do and just like making my data cleaning go a little bit faster, is to use find and replace. So find and replace, that means you can search for a word and replace it with another word, or you can search for that word and then replace it with nothing and it deletes it out. So let's actually do that latter exercise. First, we're going to highlight the range of data that we want to clean up. And we're going to go to edit and then find and replace. You'll get a dialog box that's asking you what search term do you want to find. So in this case, we're going to type donor, all lowercase. We're going to replace it with nothing. So we're not going to put anything there. We're not even going to put a space. And we're going to check that we're using the right range. So if you kind of just scroll over, it should say A2 to A17. Perfect. And now I'm going to hit replace all and hit done. So you can see what it did is it looked for the phrase donor and then it just zeroed it out. And now what we're left with is a really nice, clean set of first names. Great. So that step is done. How about let's try to get the first name and the last name pulled together in one column. so that it matches how we have names formatted in our original data set. You could do this by physically just manually typing first name and last name together. It wouldn't take you too long for a spreadsheet of this length, but it would take you a really long time if the spreadsheet was like thousands of records. So let's use a formula. We're going to use the formula called concatenate. So we start with any formula, we start with equal sign. We write the formula name, concatenate. We're going to use that full one. And concatenate allows you to, as it says here, append strings to one another. Strings are just text phrases. So you can, that's what we want to do here. We want to basically like paste together two text phrases. So let's try this. We're going to do concatenate, open parentheses. We're going to reference the cell of the first word that we want to append. So that's A2. And now let's reference the second word, B2. Hit enter. And okay, so you can see here that this is not really exactly formatted the right way. We want a space in between the first name and the last name. So how do we do that? Let's edit this formula just a little bit. If we want to add a space, we'll have to add that in the formula. So let's edit this formula by clicking on the cell again. And in between A2 and B2, we're going to do a little tricky thing here. We're going to put a space in between quotes. Put a space, put the other quote. And now, so hopefully you can see that we have quote, space, quote, comma, and now we have that last name as B2. So let's see, enter. Okay, so that looks great. So we've done this first one. How do we do the rest of these? We could type this formula manually in each of these cells, and that would be fine. Or there's like a handy little trick is that if you click on this circle on the bottom right corner, you hold your cursor, click and hold it, and then you drag it down. The formula will just copy downwards. So you can see here, everything looks like it copied downwards. So you can see here, it's referencing A3. It automatically updated to the row below that first one, A3, a space, and then B3. Same thing with this, A4, we got a little space, B4. Perfect. Okay, so we have a spreadsheet now that has the full name and new donations. How do we add this into our original donor tab? Just as a reminder, this is our donor tab, and we want to add some new donations in here. We could kind of move between each tab and copy and paste, the new donations into there. That would be fine. Might take some time. It might, involve some human error. So there is a formula that lets us join two tables together based on a common field, and that's called VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP definitely is one of the more complicated, like conceptual ones. So we're gonna go through an easier example, and then we'll come back to this donation tab. So let's go to our VLOOKUP fruit example tab. And here we have two tables. We have on the left, we have table 1, which has a couple fruits and then some space for the price. On the right, we have table 2, which is a more complete table, which has a bunch of fruits and the prices. So here's where VLOOKUP could be helpful. For a short table like this, we could just kind of copy and paste, but again, let's try to use a formula. VLOOKUP requires that two tables have one field that is like common between them. And so the field that is common between these two tables here is this fruit column here. Fruit, and then we have fruit. And so this common field in these tables is called a joined field. We're joining two tables. The field that is common between them is called the join field. This will come up and be like very important in just a moment. Okay, so how do we begin to structure this formula? If we want to bring price into this cell here, we start our formula like we do with an equal sign. We write the function name, VLOOKUP, which stands for vertical lookup. Okay. Next, as always, we have an open parentheses. And it gives us a couple arguments to fill in. I don't know why they chose these names, but the names they chose for these arguments are not intuitive. So we're going to go slowly through each of them. We start with search key. Search key is basically like the value that you want to look up in your second table. So what is your lookup value? Here we want to know the price of a banana. So we're going to say A4, that's the value that we want to search for in the second table. A4. We're going to hit comma. Range is basically, what is the range of the table 2? The table that contains your new information. So we want the range of table 2. We can kind of just click over here and say E4 through F8. Great. Now I'll make a quick note because we're going to come back to it. It's a common error. Whenever you specify the range of table 2, that first column has to be your join field. That first column has to be the column where you're looking for your search key. We're going to go over that again. Okay, so we have table 2, that's our range. And then it asks for this index. We can also call it a column index number. So what is the column that contains the information that we want to pull into table 1? In this case, it's the second column, price. So we're going to put a 2. It's the second column, price. And then we're always going to end with the word false. False means that you want to make sure that you are performing an exact match. What I mean by that is that we are trying to look for banana in table 2. We want to make sure that we're matching it exactly as written, banana. We don't want, anything that kind of sounds like banana, or maybe it starts with the letter B. We don't want any sort of approximate match. We want to find the price associated with the word banana. So we're going to put the word false here. Okay. We're going to hit enter. Great. So just to do a really quick recap, we have our equal sign. We have the VLOOKUP formula name. We have the open parentheses. We have our search key or search term. What is the term that we want to look for in table 2? We have the range of table 2, knowing that our join field is going to be that first column. We have the number of the column that we want to return. So this is the second column, which is price. And then we want to make sure that it's matching banana exactly. This is not an approximate match, so we put false. And then we close parentheses and hit enter. And so just by looking, we can double check that this brought in the price correctly, $1, great. We can do what we did with our concatenate formula. We can pull this down by clicking on the circle and dragging. And what's going to happen? So here it pulled in the price for Apple correctly, but then we get an error on Kiwi. Why is that? So let's double click in the cell to just kind of troubleshoot a little bit what's going on here. So we see that by dragging the formula, it updated the reference to Kiwi A6. That's great. But then it also pulled down the table range. So what we're dealing with here is a relative, it's called like a relative reference, is that when we move the formula, then the reference ranges are going to move too. So we need to fix that by kind of locking down this table range. So let's do this. Let's delete what we have here and go back to this first one. And we want to lock down this table range, E4 to F8, so that it doesn't move when we copy down this formula. And we can do that by including dollar signs next to the column, dollar sign next to the row, and do the same here, dollar sign, dollar sign. So these little dollar signs are called anchors, and they allow you to kind of lock down the reference that you're specifying. So let's do that and hit enter. Now let's drag this formula down to copy it and see if it worked. Great. Okay, awesome. So we see that if we can click back into this formula here, it's pulling Kiwi. It's still referencing the correct range of table 2. And we got the right price. All right, so this is a VLOOKUP in trying to, what it does is joining 2 tables together based on that common join field. Let's now go back to this Tony Soprano example and see if we can pull in that new donor data using VLOOKUP. And go back to the donor tab. We start here in the new donations column. We start our VLOOKUP formula by hitting equals, VLOOKUP, open parentheses. Now our search key is going to be donor name, right? We want to search for the donor name in our new donations table and return the new donation amount. So we're going to say Christopher Moltisanti in cell A2 is what we want to look up. Okay, comma. Our range for our second table is going to be, we're going to click on the new donations tab and actually highlight this range. We're only going to highlight C2 through D17 because we have this like this full name column in our as the first column here. So C2 to D17. We're going to hit comma. We're going to say the column index that we want to return is again our second column, donations, new donations, and then as usual, we're going to say false. We're always going to say false. Close parentheses and enter. And it bounces us back to the donor tab, brings in the correct donations in this new cycle for Christopher Moltisanti. Now, what we did not do so far is lock down that little range. So let's go ahead and do that really quickly. Let's double click. Let's put a little $ or anchor right before our column C and our row 2, $ before the D, $ before 17, enter. Okay. Now we can pull this down. Hopefully it'll find all these other donors in the new donations tab and pull in their new donation amounts. Great. So from here, we could do additional analyses on, we could figure out for these new donations, what's the sum, min max, how has it changed over time between the old and the new, for example. We could do a new pivot table showing how the new donations are aggregated by industry. Yeah, and this is a type of data analysis that I do quite frequently when I'm looking into contributions to politicians as part of a campaign. I will say VLOOKUP, if you're feeling a little bit confused, that is very normal. VLOOKUP is probably one of the most tricky formulas, but it's also one of the most useful. I use it all the time. So if feel free to come back to this, um, watch the recording of this, practice on your own, visit the help pages for VLOOKUP. They're usually pretty great. And then if you search for like VLOOKUP tutorial online, YouTube also has some great ones. Yeah, I will say being a little bit confused at first is very common. But hopefully this gets you started to where you can troubleshoot any issues you may encounter doing that. I'll finish by going back to the slides and just recapping what we've done. So just to recap, a couple tips with VLOOKUP. Always just if you're getting an error, there's a couple of things to just check. One is double click on your formula and see, is it actually referencing the cells that you want it to? Have you locked your range using those anchors, or did it drag and then exclude some data? In your table range, is the join field that first column? Right, and the join field should be the field that's common between both tables. And then also, because we're doing an exact match, is that search key that we're pulling from table 1 and then looking for in table 2, is it spelled the exact same way, or is there just like little tiny differences in how it's spelled? Are there spaces dangling on either end of that word that you need to clean up first? And then also just double check that word that you're searching for, does it actually exist in table 2? Or maybe, you know, in the instance of donor data, sometimes people will donate at one part of the year, but then not the other. So you want to just double check that their name, if you're using donation data, is actually in both tables. Quick recap. We went over a lot. This has definitely been a very packed training. Thank you for staying with us this long. But so we went over pivot tables where you can create tallies or summarize data over categories or groups. We did find and replace that allows you to replace or even delete words to clean up your data. We went over some formulas that maybe you'll use frequently, just like sum, minimum, maximum, and average. We talked through the formula concatenate, which is just an overly fancy word, which just means pasting together different text phrases. And then we tried to tackle the VLOOKUP function, which allows you to join tables together based on a common field. Hopefully this is helpful. Definitely would love to hear any of your feedback. We have a poll, which I can turn it over to Molly to kick it off. But yeah, if you need any other help, just definitely put your questions in the eval and we'll try to incorporate them into whatever next training that we're doing too.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lauren. That was great. Yeah, like Lauren said, we just have another quick poll at the end here that Jen is going to launch. If you could again just take maybe 2 minutes to answer that, it's really helpful for us as we think about doing this training again or building on it in the future. Awesome. We'll do like 10 more seconds. So finish up. Awesome. Thanks, Jen. You can end that. And thanks everyone for responding. It's super helpful for us. So just a couple more things we have as we close out. Lauren, if you want to go to the next slide. Um, as we said, a recording of today will be up on our YouTube channel. There's a link at the bottom here. And then we'll also email everyone the slide deck, as well as there's a folder that will have them in there by the end of the day. You can scan this QR code real quick. And the slides for the previous Excel training are also in there. And then let's go to the next one. Again, a reminder, littlesis.org/trainings for all the trainings we have coming up for the rest of the year. And then lastly, we do these trainings for free. If you want to donate, make a small donation. We always appreciate that. You can scan this QR code or go to littlesis.org/donate to make sure that we can keep putting these on for as many people for free as possible. And then I think very last, if you want to get in touch with us, this is all of our information for Lauren and I, as well as the organization. Um, and thank you guys so much again for joining us. And I think that's it for today. Thanks all. Thanks, Lauren, and thanks, Jen.